What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, undefeated, unified WBC IBF welterweight world champion, and his legendary trainer and trainer of the year, Derrick James. They look at the situation with undefeated 3-division world champion, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, and currently the WBO welterweight world champion, Terence Crawford, as a fight that could happen down the line. But first, Errol Spence will be making his ring return November 21st against 2-division world champion, former junior welterweight unified champion, and former WBC welterweight world champion Danny Swift Garcia November 21st. This would be the first time Errol Spence graces the squared circle since suffering his horrific car accident October 10th, just 12 days after unifying the belt against two-time welterweight world champion Showtime Shawn Porter and gaining the WBC title September 28th. With that said, Derrick James believes that Showtime Shawn Porter is a more valuable fight for Errol Spence as far as revenue goes because of the selling point of Shawn Porter, opposed to that of Terence Crawford, in which Derrick James has a huge point. Because he pointed out that Terence Crawford just doesn't sell. He says Shawn Porter is a better seller than Terence Crawford. He says Shawn Porter's star power is actually bigger than Terence Crawford. Now, people value Terence Crawford as the better fighter than Shawn Porter. But when it comes to drawing power, Derrick James has a huge point. He has a great point. Because if you look at the pay-per-view sales for Terence Crawford, his 2 pay-per-views with Amir Khan, former multi-division world champion, and with Victor Postol, who was the champion, I believe he was the WBC champion at junior welterweight when they fought for unification bout, it just didn't do well. The Victor Postol fight is reported to do somewhere between 70 to 100,000 pay-per-view buys. And the Amir Khan fight is anywhere between 150 to 200,000 pay-per-views. So that's not great. It's just not good numbers. And when it comes to you look at Shawn Porter. Now, people could say Shawn Porter never headlined his own pay-per-view, but he did against Errol Spence. And that one fight with Shawn Porter and Errol Spence has doubled the numbers of, Terence Crawford's 2 fights. That's the difference. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, you got to say Shawn Porter, who people claim wasn't a big draw. Shawn Porter can't sell. Shawn Porter is not a hot commodity within the sport of boxing. But and you got to look at the excitement that Shawn Porter is bringing to the ring. Shawn Porter's resume is better than most guys' resume in the sport of boxing. It just is. It just is what it is, right? Shawn Porter, is an exciting style. He's never been blown out in any fight, and it just is what it is, So when he says that, and on top of it, Shawn Porter is going to be Errol Spence's mandatory. Now, it's going to be a huge rematch because, the first fight, was exciting. It came down to the wire. Came down to Errol Spence dropping Shawn Porter in the 11th round and then clearly winning the 12th round to separate himself in that fight. And that's pre-accident. You understand? So this is Errol Spence. Now, Errol Spence, now we know Shawn Porter, so it's being reported that Victor Postol and Terence Crawford did about 50,000 pay-per-view buys, according to Bob Arum. 50,000 pay-per-view buys is not a big number. You understand? He says, Bob Arum said that it lost about 100,000 pay-per-view buys, but it did about 50 to 60 buys on HBO pay-per-view, but it did stronger than expected, according to Bob Arum. This was September of 2016, when Bob Arum stated this. And then his fight with Amir Khan did anywhere between 150. That's just not enough. Shawn Porter and Errol Spence did over 300 to 350,000 pay-per-view buys. So you looking at when you matching the numbers between Shawn Porter and Terence Crawford numbers. Shawn Porter, one fight with Errol Spence, did bigger numbers than 2 fights for Terence Crawford on pay-per-view. Now I know people are going to say, well, Errol Spence was the draw on that card. Yeah, well, this is true, but you still have to point to the fact that Shawn Porter was part of the headline. You understand? So he was part of the headline, and Shawn Porter, from his standpoint, can say, well, my first pay-per-view headline, I did bigger numbers than Terence Crawford put together. Now, Shawn Porter did campaign for a fight between himself and Terence Crawford. He said he met with Terence Crawford. He talked to Terence Crawford, and Terence Crawford said he had other plans. So with that said, we got to see how this all plays out. But, Terence Crawford, style-wise, stylistically, he's viewed as the best pound-for-pound boxer in the world. But the biggest fight in the sport of boxing is being considered Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. But if if Errol Spence, like Derrick James is saying, they view Shawn Porter as a bigger fight, selling-wise, drawing-wise, and he's the mandatory. Now, he's also, oddly enough, the mandatory for Terence Crawford, the WBO belt. And he said, I'm sure Shawn Porter has been campaigning for a rematch with Errol Spence. Shawn Porter is going to push for a fight with Errol Spence over a fight with Terence Crawford. He's going to push harder. He wants to redeem that loss. And this will be Shawn Porter's first rematch to be able to rectify a loss on his resume. He didn't get the rematch with Kell Brook. He didn't get a rematch with Keith Thurman. And this will be his rematch with Errol Spence. So, like Shawn Porter said, though, he did talk to Terence Crawford. He asked for the fight. His father, trainer, and manager, Kenny Porter, said that that's a fight that they're looking to make. But he said Terence Crawford told him he had other plans, but there seems to be no plan as far as Terence Crawford's layout with his next opponent. It's looking like they're going in the direction of Kell Brook, and we have to see how that plays out. But with that said, Shawn Porter's definitely, making a case for himself, and Derrick James, like he stated, is he brings in more pay-per-view. He brings in more of a draw. Now, my argument would be that the bigger fight we know the boxing world is calling for is Terence Crawford, Errol Spence. Because Terence Crawford is considered the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and Errol Spence is considered top 5 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I am of the belief that if Errol Spence beats Danny Swift Garcia November 21st, that he should be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Number one, he should be considered that after going to the UK, defeating Kell Brook, and taking the IBF title, defending it multiple times, fighting undefeated 4-division world champion Mexican superstar boxer Mikey Garcia, then fighting Showtime Shawn Porter, now coming off of suffering a horrific car accident and going right into a fight with a former 2-division world champion Danny Garcia and beating Danny Garcia. That speaks volumes to me. And I believe that Errol Spence is the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world should he be successful against Danny Garcia. But like I said, so that is the biggest fight in the sport of boxing, and we can't drop the ball on this. We just can't. Yes, Shawn Porter, value-wise, selling-wise, with his one pay-per-view with Errol Spence, and like I said, most people are going to say, well, Errol Spence was the A side. Errol Spence carried that card. He was the reason it was successful, not Shawn Porter. And rightfully so. We know the bigger name on that fight was Errol Spence Jr. But these are all fights that we want to see. But when you come to the fight with Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, there's nothing bigger than that. Shawn Porter, Errol Spence rematch is not going to be bigger than Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. But I understand where Derrick James is coming from. But we got to see how this all plays out. First things first, Errol Spence got to handle business November 21st. But that's all I got for y'all, man. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue, Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon, and get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shouts out to the entire LDBC. Shouts out to New Media. Shouts out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. And tune in today. We'll be live. Let's make it happen, man. Biggest fight in boxing. Let me know if y'all think there's a bigger fight out there than Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. Drop that comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. I don't believe so. I believe the biggest fight in the sport of boxing is Terence Crawford and Errol Spence. There's a lot to be desired there. The fan bases are both going back and forth, drawing back and forth. The hype, the build-up is huge. I don't think there's no fight bigger. But let me know what y'all think. Peace.